a new movie is shaking up the entire Western world. The name Citizen Vigilante. And maybe you have heard about that movie. We have to talk about it, not just as a movie review. We are going to skip that part. There are many people doing that, as I will show you in a second, but from a political and cultural perspective, because what is happening here is very interesting, extremely disruptive. I would call this the most important movie of this decade, even though it's not a great movie from a craft perspective, but it's the most brave and most daring movie in a decade, because for the first time we have a truly political movie here. And it also is very, very dangerous. And I don't mean that metaphorically, I mean it literally. So let's dive into this topic and understand what makes this thing so special. And we start with a trailer to give you a little bit of a taste what this is all about, and then we discuss it, and I will explain.
Idiot. No, you're an idiot. Right? No, you're a bigger idiot. No, you're an even bigger idiot. Right? That's not an argument. As far as the
ad of Peterson Academy.
The truth is this: you are all being used.
The vigilante citizen is delivering a brand of justice that some believe the authorities have failed to provide, targeting both criminals and those in power accused of allowing crime to flourish unchecked.
There's been a lot said about me, so I thought you should hear directly from me. I'm here to help you take that control back.
The state, court, police. See, you think that they've failed you, but they haven't. No, they only exist to control you.
Do you want justice?
Yes.
Let's get some fresh blood. You walk down the street and you get stabbed or robbed.
He's a real hero.
We need more guys like this.
What does your country do? Nothing.
Our current system is failing to protect our citizens.
He's like the real deal.
He's playing with us.
What if everything they ever taught you was utter nonsense? We can change history.
So, long story short, I will give you a summary before we jump into what is happening here. The summary of this movie, which is clearly a B movie, very low production budget. They did a pretty decent job for a low budget. I don't know what the exact budget is. People say between 750,000 and 5 million. So very tiny, very independent movie. But what Uwe Boll, the director, does here is to depict migrant crime in Europe, specifically rape. So there is a 14-year-old being raped by 7 migrants, and the vigilante basically goes on a killing spree. Bottom line, kills the family of the migrants and each of the rapists, also kills a judge and also kills a bunch of policemen, and in the end kind of wins. So maybe you think this is not a big deal, it's just a revenge movie. But as you can imagine, in Europe, it is a big deal. Even in the United States, I think it's a big deal because it's an extreme taboo that is being addressed here. The prevalent and out of control migrant crime in Europe. In the US, it's a little less extreme, but in Europe, it's very extreme. And the authorities ignoring these crimes, and even worse, actually setting these rapists free. That is actually something, just to give you some context, if you're not in Europe, there is the case of this 15-year-old or 14-year-old girl that got raped by 7 migrants, and the court found them innocent, not because they didn't do it, or maybe not innocent, but they let them go because they said these poor migrants are traumatized, and that was just their way of dealing with the trauma. That is not a joke. That happened in Germany. I just talked to a Finnish friend. She said, oh, I know that case. It happened in Finland. It's like, what? It happened in Finland? In the UK, famously, that's not even one case. That seems to be hundreds of thousands of these cases, only that most are not even investigated. So there's an enormous rage under the surface in Europe because people who know about these things get very, very angry. And that is why this movie now, unbelievably, is topping the charts in the United States. And you see here, Citizen Vigilante is now on number 3. Today, it was on number 1 in the United States. And it competes with, movies like Project Hail Mary, $250 million production movie with Ryan Gosling. The Devil Wears Prada 2, which just came out after Citizen Vigilante, and Obsession. I don't know Obsession, but that's another big one. So, as you can see, or Mortal Kombat 2 and so on and so forth, a total independent mini-budget movie suddenly shoots to the top of the Apple TV store. It also is number 1 on Amazon. And that is a very remarkable situation. And maybe one of the reasons why this is happening is because this movie actually got effectively banned in Germany, which is a very, very big deal because the director is German. The whole movie is German. It's not set in Germany. I think it's set in Croatia, but they don't say that. They basically produced the movie in Croatia, but it's a German director. Armie Hammer is in it, which is an American actor, who has his own scandal and was canceled for 5 years or something, is now coming back with that movie. So it is a complete surprise success, an enormous commercial success, even though it wasn't even well prepared commercially because no one expected this. And so it is unbelievable what's happening. And then, of course, what happened that boosted that movie too was that Elon Musk, after it got banned in Germany, I will explain this in a second what happened, but after that happened, Elon Musk shared that movie on his X, and said nothing. He just shared it for 48 hours for free on X. So you can't watch it anymore. This link doesn't lead anywhere, but this is basically Elon sharing this, got 24 million views, and that boosted, of course, the movie even more. And now it's all over YouTube. It's all over X. Everyone is talking about it. And it's a very remarkable explosion. A very remarkable explosion of attention. So what happened in Germany? Just to set a precursor here, why this is all happening. In Germany, you have this thing called the FSK, die freiwillige Selbstkontrolle. The voluntary, it's a very German thing. It's the voluntary self-control. Very German. So how does voluntary self-control of the film industry works? It is voluntary. It's up to you to control yourself. But if you don't control yourself, we are gonna control you. And if you don't want to be controlled, we ban you. That's in a nutshell how it works in Germany. You have a voluntary self-control, similar to the United States in the basic positioning, with the difference that Germans don't understand what voluntary means. It means you do it, and if you don't do it the way we want, you have a big problem and you go to jail. So in the US, you have also a kind of a voluntary self-control of the movie industry, but it is voluntary and you don't have to do it. And they're just putting these age restrictions and stuff on the movies in the United States. In Germany, it's similar, only if you don't do it, you have a problem. And what this thing, which is government controlled, did is it reviewed the movie, came to of course, no one knows the inner workings, obviously, but they came to the conclusion very likely, okay, this is politically not feasible. We cannot show that movie because there's a ton of migrant crime in Germany, which then is not being persecuted correctly. And lots of Germans are dying and getting raped. You know the whole story all over Europe. No one does anything. And they know that too. And they said, we cannot allow a movie showing that because what would the people think? That could get totally out of control. We are not allowed to censor or ban things in Germany, but that would be against the constitution. Therefore, we will not give you that age label. And therefore, you're just not allowed to sell or distribute this movie. Problem solved. Only that Elon shared it, and now it's the number one in the United States, or at least on top of the charts. And that creates a little bit of a problem because all of X is now mocking Germany. There is a distribution deal being struck with Quiver, the distribution company, now worldwide, except Germany, UK, and a handful of other EU countries that didn't ban it yet. And this is all a very, very big deal. It tells us a bunch of things about the current sentiment in the population across the West. And I think if you're Australian, if you're Canadian, you probably have very similar sentiments here. Why is this all so important and why is it so dangerous. Let me just explain my thinking here, why I think it's worth covering this and why it's independent of your ideas of movies important to understand what's going on. By the way, one last thing. Rotten Tomatoes, the movie review site. Look at this. It has an audience score of an unbelievable 94% with 2,500 plus, so way more than 2,500 ratings of viewers. And of course, the professionals say it's the worst movie ever made. Obviously, that's not here. 1 of 5, 1 of 4, 5 of 5. You can see this is very controversial, this whole thing. And 0 of 5, 1 of 5, fail, 0.5. So it is exactly what you would expect. All the professionals say it's the worst movie ever made. All the audience and the viewers say it's the best movie ever made. So it reflects exactly what is going on in culture, that the elites, the gatekeepers, the people who want to control the narrative, like movie reviewers are a tiny little part of that. They say this can never be shown. It is the worst movie ever. Do not watch it. It is violent, it's cruel, or it's bad. They mock it. They say it's bad. They say all kinds of negative things. But the audience gives it a 94% score. In case you don't know about these things, 94% is extremely high. Hey, on this channel, we do something very important. We deeply analyze, understand, and predict capital, AGI, and politics. Not just to beat the markets and make a lot of money, even though that's important, but also to build a new society and make the future good for all of us, the pioneers. If you want to help me on this journey, you can do that by doing a very simple thing. Like and subscribe. It helps me a lot. Thank you so much for your support, and let's get back to the video. Why is that? This is one of the reasons why this is so dangerous. It is so dangerous because it shows that if you show some courage as a producer, as a director, if you go out of that woke mind bubble in Hollywood, and also, of course, even worse in Europe, and say, you know what, screw this, I will just make a movie that a lot of people are going to watch. This is something very unusual in the movie business. Normally, that's not how you start. You start first, what is the message? What do I have to do to please my, all the people around me? And then you can think within that little frame and matrix, okay, how can I maybe get some viewers? So it's a very afterthought in the media business, how you create a successful media business. Why is that? No one knows, because we are in this crazy matrix at this point. So what Uwe Boll achieved here is a financial mind disruption. By the way, here's Uwe Boll. That is his website. And here he says, if people hate me, they hate me. That's very Uwe Boll. And he does not have a right-wing background or a right-wing movie background. He did very controversial movies, but not politically clear. Most of them are neutral or show both sides, whatever. So that's not what this is all about. But what Uwe now showed, and that will be a very powerful message sent into the movie creator and producer group, is very simple. If you show some balls, if you actually develop a sentiment, like a sense for what's going on politically, if you actually become a true artist does not get his orders or her orders from Goldman Sachs and Nike and from the government. A true artist says what is important, even if it's scary, even if it's not allowed. What is actually important? What moves people's souls? Where is the injustice happening in our society? Where are marginalized opinions? Where are victims that are being persecuted and pushed under the rug, like rape victims, for example, by the government and by the authorities? That is what true art should actually be all about. At this point, we think art is all about being approved, stunning, and brave. It's like, oh my God, my neighbor is gay and I make a movie about it. But that is exactly what the government and everyone else in power wants you to do. Therefore, it's not stunning and brave. It is stunning and brave to cover the topics where true injustice happens. And you can tell true injustice when you are not allowed to talk about it. For example, the replacement of Europeans. Total taboo. Many topics are interested in life, but when you hit a topic where everyone starts screaming around you and above you, you know you hit some form of nerve, and you know that you hit the matrix somehow. So what Uwe Boll is doing here is extremely, extremely powerful, because it sends a message, even on a commercial level, to every filmmaker out there, to every director, to every producer, and say, you know what, if you show a little bit of balls, you can turn 2 million into 200 million overnight within 2 weeks. Just do it. So that is extremely disturbing and dangerous for the Matrix. Imagine you're the German government. Imagine you're Keith Starmer. Imagine in the United States you're certain people. Imagine you're Macron. Imagine you're any of these people. And this message gets out. That is not a good message for you. Because now everyone is incentivized, like, you know what, maybe I do a controversial movie. Maybe I'm actually starting to make movies, to create fictional stories that tell all about the injustice and the madness that's happening, especially in a way that everyone is already sensing, because it hits a powder keg and will explode, and it will reward the makers with millions, tens of millions, and potentially even hundreds of millions of dollars. So that is very dangerous. And what's also very dangerous is that movies, of all things, some people think about the news. We need to get the facts out. We need to tell people statistics. We need to tell people about the bad things that are happening. We have to tell about people about Epstein and the client list and what people are really doing there. But let's not forget, that's all fine. But the most powerful Overton window shifting tool ever invented is actually fiction. It's telling stories that resonate with the people and have enough reality or references to reality in there to truly move the hearts and minds of people. Because fiction, by definition, is much easier to consume. It's fun to consume. You don't need to use your brain. No one wants to hear actually about Epstein and all this dirty, terrible stuff. But a movie is designed to entertain, so you reach way more people. It's way easier to consume, and it allows to actually tell the story much more elegantly than just a bunch of statistics. So that is the first reason why this is so dangerous. It now sets a precedent and a proven business model for every filmmaker, for every game maker, by the way. If you're a game maker, shoot me an email, shoot me a message on X. If you're an independent first-person shooter, because I have some ideas. Now, or if you know anyone who's a game maker, please get us connected. I want to discuss some things. Now, second, why is it so dangerous? Why is it so dangerous? The second thing, political activation, of course. Now, because of X and because of this thing spreading like crazy, this is also very dangerous just purely politically. Because now many more people are aware, not just of these terrible rape cases. You know, because people see the movie and they will think, if they are a little blue-pilled, they will think this is horrible. But who makes up these horrible stories of 7, young migrants raping a poor girl? And then they will start doing research and see, oh, this actually happens all the time. Okay, and then they will think, oh, but they don't get just released by the courts. And then they will read up and it's like, well, unfortunately, they actually just got released. Yes. And so that is extremely dangerous. It's also extremely dangerous that it shifts in the minds of people this idea that we are often being suggested that each one of us is the crazy one. There might be 100 million people in Europe who are extremely angry about this, but each of the 100 million thinks they're isolated. Each of them thinks, oh, well, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe it's not that bad to rape girls, little teenage girls. Maybe it's just me thinking this is a horrible crime, but everyone else seems to be okay with it. I don't know what to do about it. Now you shift the Overton window, you shift the connectivity of people, and they think, wait a moment, there seem to be other people here also outraged. Maybe I am right in my feeling that this is absolutely horrific. And you might think, what I'm saying is overdone or stretched here with this psychology, but look at Great Britain. A lot of people, millions, knew about these rape gangs. Millions knew there were grooming gangs and little girls being sexually abused, raped, and killed, some of them. But everyone thought, oh, I'm personally outraged, but maybe I'm just the crazy one. Society seems to be fine with it, and the judges say it's not a big deal. Now, there's resistance forming, there's outrage, and there's emotional connectivity forming where everyone needs reflection on the emotions and say, no, it's absolutely correct to be outraged. These are horrible things that cannot be allowed to happen. That's the second reason why this is so dangerous and could easily escalate. And now let's get to the third one, which is probably the most serious one. It is about copycats. It's about in real life copycats where people, someone who's a little weird, someone who's a little prone to these things, but so far didn't have the idea, didn't have the blueprint, thinks, you know what, that sounds like a cool job to be a citizen vigilante. They get some, whatever, baseball bats or guns and start actually doing that in real life. They might kill a judge. They might kill a bunch of rape gang members. And of course, that's exactly where things get extremely serious. Because what happens if that happens? There's two problems with this. The first problem is the obvious one. When society fails in its justice system and people become vigilantes, that rarely goes well, because vigilante justice is not the ideal way of doing justice. Because vigilante, and you see it in the movie, even that vigilante, they are complicated characters. They're not good guys. They tend to be actually kind of bad guys who might do something that is good for tactical justice, but next time they might do something that is not so good, and they are not clear-headed people. And that creates problems. But there's something much, much bigger, much more problematic here than this primary effect of vigilante justice that might now get inspired a lot. And that second problem, and that is where vigilante judgments and action escalates into something much bigger. What happens? What happens in a country like Germany, in a country like Sweden, in a country like France, and especially in a country like the UK or Ireland, where people have had it? The people who are angry are extremely angry because they know the truth. They know that the justice system is failing all of us on a massive, unbelievable scale. And what happens if a vigilante starts doing that? Something that's clearly wrong under normal justice frameworks. But everyone is so angry that when you do surveys after something bad happens, if you would do neutral surveys, of course, no one would ever show these surveys, but if you would do a survey, just play it through your mind. Imagine in the UK, there is a case in Birmingham or wherever, where some vigilante starts murdering rape gangs, Pakistani rape gangs, and that becomes public, and then you do a survey. How many people, what percent of the population would actually approve of that? Imagine in the UK or in Germany, wherever, a judge gets murdered by a vigilante, by a brutal guy. He just abducts the judge and kills the judge who actually, released these rape gang members. And again, you would do a survey on that. And suddenly you would see, because the population is so enraged and so angry at this point, that the approval for this kind of thing is in the double digits. It's 10%, it's 20%, whatever it is. It doesn't even matter, even if it's 5%. What happens at that point? You start to destabilize the entire system, because that then would further move the needle towards vigilante justice, because you had the same effect that people see each other as like, oh, I thought I was the only weirdo that likes that kind of justice after we were treated so unfairly. But now you see, no, everyone is liking that, or 10% or 20% are even admitting liking that. And suddenly the whole thing switches, and like, maybe we have to overthrow this whole thing. And so maybe you think I'm too scared or too afraid of what might happen here. But I do think we are sitting on a powder keg at this point, because too many extremely bad things have happened. There was too much collusion in the government to support or protect the bad guys. And people are extremely angry And this kind of movie throws a match into a powder keg, potentially. That is the reason why this is an interesting and dangerous situation. I believe the movie is not to blame for anything. The people who are to blame for these things are the people in charge who let this escalate to the point it has escalated. That have allowed these horrible, horrible crimes against the most innocent, the most defenseless victims, young little girls, to happen. And that have then, instead of persecuting the rape gangs, persecuted the people who spoke up against that. There was also an outrageous case of a French girl who got raped and sexually assaulted, then spoke out against it, mentioned the nationality of the people who did that, and the French government started persecuting her for hate speech. And these things, we have to understand, these things are not just mistakes. These things are not just bad things that happen. These things are the worst possible thing a government could do in terms of keeping its population aligned with itself. It enrages people so much, these things, that the attitude towards the government and the justice system becomes so toxic and hostile that vigilante justice, also against the justice system, becomes something an increasing number of people will approve the more it happens. And I think it has happened already way too much. So I hope that movie inspires the lawmakers, the people in charge, and the justices to check on themselves and reflect a little bit. Instead of trying now to ban it, they should think about how did we get here? How do we stop this escalating, spiraling out of control violence or thoughts of violence or impulses to violence? How do we get justice back into this whole situation? And I hope they can point at themselves a little bit and understand that they're in charge of restoring justice. Because if you don't restore justice, vigilantes will pop up and they will get increasing support of the population, and that is not a good thing. So I hope that was helpful and interesting. I had to comment on this. I did a post on X that got a lot of attention, nearly 1 million views, where I just reported on Citizen Vigilante. And I hope we can all be mature enough and reflected enough to understand it is never the fault of the artist or the filmmaker. It is the fault of reality and failing politicians, failing administrators, failing justice system representatives. So let's see what happens. We'll keep covering this, and I hope to see you tomorrow.